My name is Evelyn Cross, and I am 35 years old. Last Saturday, at my own birthday dinner, my 7-year-old nephew pressed his small face against my ear and whispered 10 words that fundamentally altered the trajectory of my entire family. "Auntie Evie, they're going to take your money after dessert." He whispered it right over a slice of a $600 custom fondant cake. The frosting was still gleaming under the dining room chandelier. What I did in the next 72 hours cost me my older sister, my brother-in-law, and every shred of family harmony I thought I possessed. But it successfully protected an $8.5 million estate, and it saved something else. Something I didn't even know I was capable of protecting. But that part comes later. I was sitting at the head of the massive custom-built oak dining table in my sister's immaculate suburban home. 12 guests, expensive champagne, catered appetizers, and a 7-year-old boy who couldn't eat his chicken fingers because the terrible weight of his parents' secret was crushing him. If you are new here, understand this: I do not deal in emotion. I deal in architecture, specifically digital architecture. For the last 10 years, I have been a senior cybersecurity systems architect for one of the largest financial institutions in the world. I build impenetrable digital fortresses. I design systems that protect billions of dollars from hostile external threats. I write the algorithms that detect microscopic anomalies in financial data. I make absolutely certain that secure structures hold. That is what I do for a living. My parents passed away 3 years ago. It wasn't sudden, but it was devastating. A long, brutal battle with illness that took both of them within 6 months of each other. They were incredibly successful commercial real estate developers. When they died, they left behind a massive, complicated portfolio, commercial leases, liquid investments, and the crown jewel, an $8.5 million generational trust. Because I was the one who understood forensic accounting and complex financial structures, my parents made me the sole executor and primary trustee of the estate. When they passed, the grief completely paralyzed me. For the first time in my life, my highly analytical brain simply shut down. I stopped checking my personal servers. I stopped looking at my own investment portfolios. I sat in my minimalist high-rise penthouse and stared at the walls for weeks. Grief does that to you. It turns you into a ghost haunting your own life. That is when my older sister, Valerie, stepped in. Valerie is 39. She runs a luxury event planning business. She views the world exclusively through the lens of aesthetics, Instagram metrics, and social validation. She is married to Marcus, a man whose primary occupation seems to be nodding aggressively whenever Valerie speaks and wearing designer suits he cannot afford. Valerie came to my penthouse 3 weeks after the second funeral. She brought expensive green juice and a thick manila folder. "Evie, you are exhausted," Valerie had said, her voice dripping with performative empathy. "You cannot handle the stress of the estate maintenance right now. Let me handle the mundane stuff, the property taxes, the routine maintenance bills on the commercial spaces, the basic accounting. You just focus on healing." Because I had just buried both of my parents, and because my brain was clouded with an unbearable fog, I did something I had never done in my entire professional career. I bypassed my own security protocols. I authorized Valerie as a joint signatory on the primary operational checking account for the estate. It wasn't the main trust that was locked behind layers of legal and cryptographic security, but it was the massive liquidity pool we used to maintain the properties. At any given time, it held roughly $600,000 in liquid cash. "It's just for emergencies, Evie," Valerie promised, sliding the bank forms across my kitchen island. "So I can pay the contractors and the taxes without bothering you." I signed the paper. I handed my sister the digital keys to the operational vault. That single signature remained active for 3 years. And in that time, Valerie did a lot more than pay the property taxes. Valerie and Marcus lived in a sprawling 5-bedroom house in a wealthy suburb. A house with a massive mortgage they bought to project an image of effortless success. Valerie's luxury event business, however, was an elaborate illusion. You cannot fund a country club lifestyle by organizing 4 aesthetically pleasing weddings a year. But for 3 years, their lifestyle mysteriously expanded. They bought a second vacation home, they leased 2 brand new Range Rovers. Valerie's Instagram was a relentless feed of high-end designer purchases and lavish business retreats to St. Bart's. Whenever I asked her how the business was doing, Valerie would smile her flawless, practice smile and say, "We are scaling rapidly, Evie. Image is everything in this industry. I should have run the analytics. I should have audited the data. But I was grieving. And I was working 80-hour weeks protecting other people's billions, completely ignoring the massive vulnerability in my own network." Until the birthday party Saturday evening, Valerie's house, she had insisted on hosting my 35th birthday. The dining room was a masterclass in performative wealth. Custom floral arrangements, a private chef, 10 of her socialite friends who barely knew me, invited solely so Valerie could play the role of the generous, wealthy matriarch of the family. My nephew Leo was unusually quiet. Leo is a brilliant, observant child. He has my analytical mind, trapped in a family that only values the superficial. He sat next to me at the massive table, pushing his food around his plate. His foot was tapping against the chair leg, in a frantic, irregular rhythm. A clear sign of acute anxiety. After the main course, while the private chef was clearing the plates, and Valerie was loudly boasting about her upcoming trip to Milan, Leo leaned in. He didn't just lean, he pressed his face against my ear so closely I could feel his breath. "Auntie Evie," he whispered, his voice trembling so violently it barely registered. "They're going to take your money after dessert." My hand froze. I was holding a crystal wine glass. I did not drop it. I did not gasp. 10 years of facing down hostile international hackers has trained my central nervous system to remain absolutely flat when the alarms go off. "What do you mean, Leo?" I whispered back, my voice smooth and perfectly calm. "Daddy told Mommy they have to get you to sign the paper before you leave tonight," Leo breathed, his eyes darting terrified toward the kitchen. "Mommy said it has to happen after the cake, when you're happy and drinking wine. They said you won't even read it." I looked across the table. The $600 lemon fondant cake was sitting on the marble counter. Right next to it was a pristine, thick manila folder. I gently rubbed Leo's back. I smiled a warm, entirely fabricated smile. I took a slow sip of my wine. "Thank you, buddy," I whispered. "I've got it." 2 minutes later, Valerie clinked her glass. "Evie, time for cake. But first, Marcus and I just have a tiny, boring piece of administrative paperwork for the estate taxes. Just need your quick signature so we don't get penalized next week. Let's knock it out before we cut the cake." Valerie reached for the manila folder. Her smile was blinding, her eyes were completely dead. I stood up, I put my hand to my temple and let out a soft, highly convincing sigh. "Valerie, I am so sorry," I said, projecting the perfect amount of exhaustion. "I think this champagne is triggering a massive migraine. My vision is actually blurring. I can't read a single word right now, let alone legal documents. I need to go home and lie in the dark." Valerie's smile fractured just for a microsecond. "But I saw it, Evie, it literally takes 2 seconds, Marcus interjected, his voice carrying a sudden, desperate edge. "Just sign the bottom line. I never sign legal documents with a migraine, Marcus." "You know how anal I am about compliance," I replied, grabbing my designer coat. "We will handle it on Monday, save me a slice of the cake." I walked out of their house. I got into my sleek, black electric sedan. I drove out of their manicured neighborhood at exactly the speed limit. My hands did not shake on the steering wheel, my heart rate did not elevate. I was no longer a grieving sister. I was a senior cybersecurity architect, and I had just been notified of a critical security breach from inside my own network. At 11 p.m., I walked into my high-rise penthouse. The city was glowing through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I did not turn on the lights. I walked directly into my secure home office. I booted up my encrypted workstation. 6 monitors flared to life, casting a cold blue glow across the minimalist room. I bypassed the standard banking portals. I went straight to the back-end data logs. I initiated a full, forensic deep dive into the operational estate account I had given Valerie access to 3 years ago. The data loaded, The numbers cascaded down my screens. When you build systems to detect fraud, you look for patterns. Human beings are inherently lazy when they steal. They establish a rhythm. I found Valerie's rhythm in exactly 4 minutes. It started small, 2 years and 10 months ago, a transfer of 4,500 labeled, estate maintenance plumbing. 3 weeks later, $6,000 labeled, estate maintenance, landscaping. Then the numbers began to aggressively scale. 12,000, 18,500, 20,000. Every single transfer was routed through a highly sophisticated series of dummy LLCs, shell companies registered in Delaware, that Valerie had clearly set up to obscure the final destination of the funds. But Valerie is an event planner, not a hacker. She used the same IP address her home network to execute every single transaction. I ran a script to isolate and aggregate every unauthorized transfer that did not possess a corresponding, verified commercial invoice in our database. The script finished executing in 12 seconds, total unauthorized transfers, 47, total capital liquidated. 418 tis, 650, $418,000 systematically siphoned out of my family's estate to fund her St. Bart's vacations, her Range Rovers, and her pathetic illusion of success. But that wasn't the worst part. I ran a secondary scan on the Manila folder she tried to make me sign. I hacked into Valerie's cloud storage, a task that took me less time than brewing a cup of coffee, because she used her dog's name as her master password. I found the document. It was not a tax compliance form. It was a highly complex, customized, durable financial power of attorney. If I had signed that piece of paper, drunk on champagne and blinded by a fabricated headache, I would have legally granted Valerie unrestricted, unilateral control over the entire $8.5 million trust. She wasn't just stealing the operational cash anymore. The operational cash was running out. She was moving to liquidate the entire empire. I sat in the cold blue light of my servers. The silence of the penthouse was absolute. I did not cry, I did not scream, I did not call my best friend to vent. When a malicious actor breaches your network and attempts to steal your entire infrastructure, you do not throw a tantrum, you surgically amputate their access, you secure the perimeter, and then you annihilate their digital existence. I opened a blank encrypted notepad on my center monitor. I began to write my execution protocol. Step 1, the financial firewall. Step 2, the legal guillotine. Step 3, the absolute destruction of the illusion. Sunday morning, 8 a.m. I did not call Valerie, I called Julian Vance. Julian is a 62-year-old apex predator who masquerades as an elite corporate attorney. He handled my parents' complex real estate acquisitions. He charges $2,000 an hour, and he is worth 10 times that amount because he possesses zero empathy and infinite legal aggression. Julian, I said when he answered his private line. I have a catastrophic internal breach. My sister has embezzled $418,000 from the operational accounts and attempted to execute a fraudulent power of attorney to seize the primary trust. Julian was silent for exactly 3 seconds. Are the primary trust assets currently secure? The trust is secure. I bypassed signing the POA last night, but she has systematically drained the operational liquidity over 3 years. I am opening my office in 20 minutes, Julian said, his voice sharpening like a blade. Bring the forensic data. I arrived at Julian's massive glass-walled office in Midtown Manhattan at 9:00 a.m. I brought a single encrypted titanium hard drive. I plugged the drive into his secure terminal. I displayed the color-coded data visualization of every single fraudulent transaction. I showed him the IP logs linking the dummy LLCs directly to Valerie's home router. I showed him the forged power of attorney document I extracted from her cloud storage. Julian put on his reading glasses. He reviewed the data with the cold precision of a surgeon examining a fatal X-ray. This is not a family misunderstanding, Evelyn, Julian stated flatly. This is a meticulously structured, multi-year felony. Under federal law, the structuring of these dummy LLCs constitutes wire fraud and money laundering. The theft itself is grand larceny. If we hand this drive to the FBI, your sister and your brother-in-law will serve a minimum of 10 to 15 years in federal prison. I do not want them in federal prison, I replied, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. If they go to prison, my nephew goes into the foster system. Leo is the only reason I still have an estate to protect. He told me the truth when the adults in his life were actively plotting a felony. Then what is your strategic objective? Julian asked. I want absolute terrifying control, I want the money secured, I want them to know that I know every single detail. And I want to mathematically destroy their illusion of wealth so completely that they can never, ever attempt to manipulate this family again. Julian smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. Then we built a fortress. Julian and I worked for 6 uninterrupted hours. We executed a financial and legal lockdown so severe it would make a Fortune 500 board weep. First, we initiated an emergency digital freeze on the joint operational account. I used my primary administrative privileges to lock Valerie's credentials. I didn't just remove her access, I engineered it so that if she attempted to log in, she would receive a terrifying, automated legal warning citing federal wire fraud statutes. Second, Julian drafted the paperwork to transfer the entire $8.5 million estate into a newly formed, ultra-secure irrevocable blind trust. I was the sole trustee. Valerie and Marcus were explicitly, legally barred from ever claiming a single cent. Third, we drafted a formal lethal demand for restitution for the stolen $418,650. It outlined the exact timeline, the dummy LLCs, and the IP addresses. It was not a request, it was a legal guillotine dangling over their heads. By 3 p.m. on Sunday, my empire was entirely sealed. Valerie could not access a single dollar. At 4 p.m., my phone buzzed, a text message from Valerie. Evie, hope your migraine is better. Are you around tomorrow for coffee? We really need to get that tax paper signed before the deadline. Love you, the sheer unadulterated audacity of it. The sociopathic persistence of a woman who thought she was outsmarting a cybersecurity architect, with a fake smile and a cup of coffee. I typed my reply with surgical precision. Migraine is gone, let's do dinner tomorrow night. My penthouse, 7 p.m. Bring Marcus, we need to review the estate's quarterly performance. Valerie replied instantly, perfect. See you then, we'll bring the paperwork. Monday morning, I did not go into my corporate office, I worked from the penthouse. I spent the entire day preparing the environment. When you confront a hostile threat, you must completely control the physical space. I wanted the penthouse to feel like an interrogation room, masked as a luxury residence. I moved the furniture in my massive glass-walled dining room. I removed the comfortable chairs. I set up a sleek black carbon fiber table. I placed exactly 3 modern, hard-backed chairs around it. I connected my encrypted laptop to the massive 80-inch OLED screen mounted on the wall. At 6:30 p.m. I ordered high-end sushi strictly for myself. I ate it in silence. I did not provide food for them. You do not feed predators who are trying to eat you. At exactly 7 p.m., the private elevator chimed. Valerie and Marcus stepped into my penthouse. Valerie was wearing a $3,000 designer dress, undoubtedly purchased with my money. Marcus was carrying the thick manila folder like it was the Holy Grail. Evie, the place looks amazing, Valerie gushed, her eyes immediately scanning the minimalist luxury of my home, likely calculating how quickly she could liquidate it once she got my signature. Sit down, I said. My voice was completely devoid of its usual sisterly warmth. It was flat, resonant, and absolute. Valerie's smile faltered. The sudden temperature drop in the room was palpable. She and Marcus slowly walked to the black carbon fiber table and sat in the hard-backed chairs. I did not sit, I stood at the head of the table. I held a small black remote in my hand. I thought we were having dinner, Marcus said nervously, glancing at the empty table. We are not having dinner, I replied. We are having an audit. I pressed the button on the remote. The massive 80-inch OLED screen flared to life, illuminating the dark room with a harsh, surgical white light. The screen displayed a highly complex color-coded data tree. 47 distinct data nodes, all branching off from a single source, the estate's operational liquidity account. What is this, Evie? Valerie asked, her voice tight, a high-pitched note of panic finally breaking through her carefully curated facade. This, I said, pointing the remote at the screen, is a complete forensic digital mapping of every single unauthorized transaction routed out of the estate's operational account over the last 34 months. I clicked the remote again. The nodes expanded, revealing precise dollar amounts, dates, and routing numbers. 47 unauthorized transfers, I stated, my voice echoing in the minimalist room. Totaling exactly $418,650. Systematically siphoned into 4 separate shell companies registered in Delaware. Marcus swallowed hard. The sound was audible in the silent room. Evie, I can explain. Valerie started, her hands gripping the edge of the carbon fiber table, so hard her knuckles turned white. It was just a temporary bridge loan. My business hit a rough patch during the off-season. I needed to maintain the cash flow to keep the vendors happy. Image is everything in my industry, you know that. I do not care about your industry's image, Valerie. I cut her off. I care about my infrastructure, and you breached my infrastructure. I clicked the remote. A new slide appeared. It was a digital map showing a thick red line tracing the transactions from the Delaware LLCs directly to an IP address. I am a senior cybersecurity architect, I continued, pacing slowly around the table like a predator circling a wounded animal. When a hostile entity steals $500,000, I don't just look at the money. I look at the digital footprint. You routed those funds through dummy corporations to obscure the destination. But you executed every single transaction from your home Wi-Fi network. Your IP address is permanently logged in the metadata. It was a loan, Valerie yelled, abandoning her calm demeanor entirely. We were going to pay it back. As soon as the new contracts cleared. You cannot pay it back, Valerie, I said coldly. Because you didn't invest it, you spent it. I ran a cross-reference on your personal social media accounts against the transaction dates. I clicked the remote again. The screen split on the left, a bank transfer of $12,000. On the right, a screenshot of Valerie's Instagram post showing a luxury vacation in St. Bart's posted 3 days later, captioned "Living my best life." So blessed, next slide, a transfer of $18,500. Next to it, a photo of Marcus posing in front of a leased, brand new Range Rover. You didn't take a bridge loan for your business, I said, the absolute disgust dripping from my words. You subsidized a pathetic, fraudulent lifestyle because you couldn't stand the fact that you are a failure. You wanted to play the wealthy socialite, and you used my parents' money, my money to fund the illusion. Marcus dropped his head into his hands. He was physically shaking. Valerie told me you agreed to it, he whispered, his voice cracking. She said you approved a family stipend from the estate. Marcus, shut up, Valerie hissed, her perfectly manicured facade completely shattering into desperate feral panic. She lied to you, Marcus, I said, not taking my eyes off Valerie. But you didn't look too closely, did you? You liked the Range Rover too much to ask for the receipts. Okay, fine, Valerie yelled, tears of angry humiliation finally spilling down her face. I took it, but I am your sister, Evelyn. I deserve some of that estate. Mom and Dad left everything to you, just because you're the smart one with the spreadsheets. It isn't fair, I had to take what was rightfully mine. It wasn't yours, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously quiet. Mom and Dad left it to me because they knew exactly who you were. They knew you would liquidate a generational empire in 5 years to buy designer handbags. They left me in charge to protect it from you. I paused, letting the silence crush the oxygen out of the room. And they were right, I added softly. Then I clicked the remote one final time. The screen cleared. A single massive document appeared. It was a high-resolution scan of the durable financial power of attorney. The fake tax form. Valerie stared at the screen, the remaining color drained completely from her face. She looked like a ghost. You didn't just want the operational cash, I said, walking to the head of the table. Placing both hands flat on the black carbon fiber, leaning in until I was inches from her face. The cash was running out, so you escalated. You forged a legal document that would grant you total, unrestricted access to the $8.5 million primary trust. You were going to get me drunk on my birthday, lie to my face, and steal my entire life. I wasn't going to take it all, Valerie stammered, her lies collapsing under the sheer weight of the forensic evidence. You are a thief, Valerie, I stated, the word hanging in the air like an executioner's axe. And you are a remarkably stupid one. I reached into my designer suit jacket and pulled out a thick, legal-sized envelope. I tossed it onto the table. It slid across the smooth surface and stopped exactly in front of Marcus's trembling hands. What is this? Marcus whispered. That is a formal legal demand for restitution, drafted by Julian Vance, the most ruthless corporate attorney in Manhattan, I replied. It outlines the theft of $418,650. It includes the IP logs, the dummy LLCs, and the forged power of attorney. Valerie stared at the envelope like it was a live grenade. As of 9 a.m. yesterday morning, I continued, outlining the devastating architecture of my retaliation. Your access to the operational accounts was permanently revoked. Furthermore, the entire $8.5 million estate has been legally transferred into an irrevocable blind trust. I am the sole trustee. You are explicitly, permanently barred from ever claiming a single cent of it. You can't do that, Valerie shrieked, panic entirely consuming her. We have debt, we have the mortgages. If you cut off the cash flow, we will lose the house. You already lost the house, I corrected her coldly. You lost it the moment you decided to steal from the person who designs security systems for a living. I pointed at the legal envelope. You have exactly 30 days to repay the stolen funds in full, I declared. If the $418,000 is not wired into my secure account by the end of the month, Julian Vance will personally hand that forensic file to the federal authorities. You will be indicted for wire fraud, grand larceny, and attempted forgery. You will go to federal prison. Marcus let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. He looked at his wife with a mixture of absolute terror and profound hatred. Evelyn, please, Valerie begged, the arrogant socialite completely gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered criminal. We don't have the money, we spent it. We can't pay it back in 30 days, please, we're family. You lost the right to use that word when you brought a fake legal document to my birthday party, I replied. Valerie's eyes suddenly darted around the room, her brain desperately searching for a scapegoat. An excuse, a way out. Her gaze landed on the manila folder Marcus was still holding. How did you know? Valerie whispered, her eyes wide with a terrifying realization. You didn't look at the folder at the party. You faked the migraine. How did you know? I looked at her for a long silent moment. I wanted her to know exactly why her entire criminal empire had collapsed. Liu told me, I said softly. Valerie gasped, physically recoiling in her chair. Your 7-year-old son. I continued, my voice laced with a sudden, fierce protectiveness, sat at your massive, expensive dining table, vibrating with anxiety, because he had heard his parents plotting a felony. And while you were bragging about your imaginary success, he leaned over and whispered the truth in my ear to protect me. He ruined everything, Valerie hissed, a venomous toxic anger flashing in her eyes. That little rat, do not ever speak about my nephew like that. I slammed my hand onto the carbon fiber table, with such explosive force that both Marcus and Valerie jumped out of their chairs. The cold fury I had been meticulously controlling finally broke the surface. Lizzo is the only decent thing that has ever come out of your pathetic, fraudulent marriage. I roared, the anger echoing off the glass walls of the penthouse. He was terrified. You placed the burden of your criminal conspiracy on the shoulders of a 7-year-old boy. He showed more integrity, more bravery, and more loyalty in 10 whispered words than you have shown in your entire miserable life. I took a deep breath, instantly locking the emotion back down behind my secure clinical firewall. If you ever punish him for telling the truth, I added, my voice dropping back to a lethal whisper. If you ever make him feel guilty for stopping a felony, I will not wait 30 days. I will call Julian Vance and I will destroy you tomorrow. I pointed toward the private elevator. The audit is over, I said. Get out of my penthouse. Marcus stood up immediately. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at his wife. He just walked toward the elevator, like a dead man walking to the gallows. Valerie stood up slowly. She looked around the massive, luxurious penthouse. She looked at the 80-inch screen, displaying the undeniable proof of her crimes. She looked at the sister she thought she could easily manipulate. She opened her mouth to speak, but there was absolutely nothing left to say. The math was definitive, the digital fortress was sealed. She turned and walked into the elevator. The doors closed, sealing them inside their own self-inflicted catastrophe. I stood alone in the quiet penthouse. I turned off the OLED screen. The room plunged back into the soft, glowing light of the city skyline. I walked into my home office, sat at my encrypted terminal, and opened a new secure ledger. I drafted a new subtrust within the main architecture of the estate. I funded it with exactly $250,000. The terms were unbreakable: the Leo Cross Educational and Independence Trust. The funds were locked, completely inaccessible to Valerie or Marcus. The money would automatically release to Leo on his 18th birthday, granting him the absolute financial freedom to escape whatever wreckage his parents left behind. He told the truth when the adults in his life were lying. That level of integrity requires a secure foundation. I made sure he had one. The fallout from that Monday night meeting was absolute, catastrophic, and completely predictable. When an illusion is shattered, the collateral damage is always devastating. Valerie and Marcus did not have $418,000. They didn't even have $50,000 in liquid cash. The desperate scramble to meet my 30-day deadline tore their marriage apart with the violent force of a centrifuge. Marcus filed for divorce 3 days later. In his filing, he aggressively attempted to shift the entire legal burden of the embezzlement onto Valerie, claiming he was an innocent spouse who had no idea the funds were stolen. He threw her to the wolves to save himself. Valerie's luxury event business collapsed overnight. You cannot maintain a high-end socialite client base when your husband is publicly accusing you of grand larceny in divorce court. Her clients fled, her vendors demanded upfront cash she no longer possessed. To avoid the federal wire fraud indictment, Valerie was forced to violently liquidate her entire life. She sold the 5-bedroom suburban house at a massive loss to a cash buyer. She returned the leased Range Rovers. She pawned the designer jewelry she had bought with my money. She managed to wire exactly $390,000 into my secure account on day 29. She sent the remaining $28,000 over the next 6 months, draining her wages from the mid-level corporate event planning job she was forced to take just to survive. I watched the transfers hit my secure servers. I didn't feel a rush of manic satisfaction. I didn't throw a party, I simply verified the data, updated the ledgers, and closed the file. The security breach was neutralized, the asset was recovered, the threat was permanently eliminated. But the architectural cleanup of a massive familial breach is rarely isolated to a single vulnerability. When you discover a backdoor in your system, you do not just patch the immediate hole, you run a comprehensive diagnostic on the entire network. 2 days after Marcus and Valerie walked out of my penthouse, I was running a secondary audit on the estate's communication servers. We maintained a legacy family email domain that my parents had set up years ago for organizing holidays and sharing photos. I still held the primary administrative rights. I wrote a simple algorithm to scan the legacy server for specific keywords. Evelyn Trust proxy mental incompetent. The script flagged 23 internal emails within 5 seconds. The emails were not from Valerie, they were from my father's older sister, my Aunt Beatrice. Beatrice is a 68-year-old woman who views the world through a thick lens of perpetual grievance. She has spent her entire adult life convinced that she was unfairly denied a larger share of my grandparents' wealth. When my parents died and I assumed control of the $8.5 million estate, Beatrice's resentment metastasized into something highly active and deeply toxic. I opened the flagged emails. They were a masterclass in insidious psychological manipulation. Beatrice had been systematically emailing Valerie, Marcus, and several extended family members over the last 6 months. Email 1 date, March 14th, subject: Worried about Evie. Valerie darling, I saw Evelyn at the Easter brunch. She looked completely exhausted. The stress of that cybersecurity job is clearly breaking her down. I am genuinely worried she is having a psychological episode. Someone needs to step in before she makes a catastrophic mistake with your parents' legacy. Email 2 date May 2nd, subject, legal options Valerie. I spoke with a friend who works in elder care. If Evelyn is truly experiencing a mental breakdown due to corporate burnout, there are legal avenues. A temporary medical conservatorship could protect the estate, while she gets the psychological help she desperately needs. You should look into a durable power of attorney, just in case. I sat in the glow of my monitors, the cold realization washing over me. Valerie wasn't a criminal mastermind. She didn't possess the intellectual capacity to formulate a strategy involving a durable power of attorney. Valerie was just the greedy, desperate executioner. Aunt Beatrice was the architect. Beatrice had spent 6 months laying the psychological groundwork, planting the seeds of my supposed mental instability, so that when Valerie finally presented the fake tax forms, the extended family would view it as a necessary rescue mission, rather than a multi-million-dollar felony. They were attempting to construct a localized familial version of a hostile corporate takeover. When you discover an advanced persistent threat, APT, in your network, a threat that operates quietly, slowly poisoning the system from the inside, you do not just delete the files. You isolate the threat, you study its vectors, and then you obliterate its capacity to ever communicate with your network again. I picked up my phone and called Julian Vance. Julian, I said, we missed a node. My Aunt Beatrice was the strategic architect behind the power of attorney. She has been circulating defamatory emails claiming I am mentally unstable to lay the groundwork for a medical conservatorship. Do you have the digital records? Julian asked, the lethal edge instantly returning to his voice. I have 23 emails timestamped, originating from her IP address. She practically handed Valerie the blueprint for the theft. Defamation per se, Julian mused, libel intending to falsely assert mental incompetence for the explicit purpose of executing a fraudulent financial seizure. The damages would be astronomical. What is your objective? I want her permanently isolated from the family network. I want her to know that her quiet, toxic little whispers have been digitally captured and weaponized. And I want her terrified. I will draft the cease and desist, Julian said. It will not be a standard warning. It will be a declaration of absolute legal war. Thursday morning, Julian's courier delivered the thick, certified legal packet to Aunt Beatrice's heavily mortgaged condo in New Jersey. I did not have to wait long for the detonation. At exactly 11:15 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID displayed Beatrice's name. I answered on the third ring. I did not say hello. I let the absolute silence of the open line do the work. Evelyn, Beatrice's voice trembled, not with the fake, dripping concern she used in her emails, but with genuine, unadulterated fear. I just received a package from a Julian Vance. I am aware, Beatrice, I said, my voice as sterile and clinical as a server room. I dictated every single word of it, Evie. You must understand, I was just concerned. You have been working so hard, and you looked so tired. I was just trying to look out for the family. She stammered, frantically trying to deploy the exact same excuse Valerie had used. You do not possess the capacity to look out for anyone but yourself, Beatrice, I replied, slicing through her pathetic defense. You spent 6 months emailing my sister, actively encouraging her to forge a durable power of attorney so she could steal $418,000 from the estate. You attempted to construct a false narrative of mental instability to justify grand larceny. I didn't know she was stealing. Beatrice shrieked, the panic escalating. I swear to you, I thought she was just trying to help. Ignorance of the execution does not absolve you of the conspiracy, I stated using the exact legal phrasing Julian had briefed me on. You are an accessory to attempted wire fraud. The 23 emails you sent are currently sitting in a secure, encrypted federal evidence locker. Evelyn, please, she sobbed. I am a 70-year-old woman. I cannot handle a lawsuit. I have nothing, which is exactly why you tried to steal what was mine, I said quietly. I let her cry for exactly 30 seconds. I did not interrupt. I did not offer a single word of comfort. I simply listened to the sound of an arrogant, manipulative woman realizing that the system she tried to hack was infinitely smarter and infinitely more ruthless than she could ever comprehend. "Listen to me very carefully, Beatrice," I said, my voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "The cease and desist is fully active. If you ever speak my name again in public, in private, at a family gathering, or in an email, if you ever so much as hint that I am anything less than a fully competent, highly lethal executor of this estate, Julian Vance will file the defamation suit. He will seize your condo, he will seize your meager retirement accounts. He will leave you with absolutely nothing but the clothes on your back." "I understand," she choked out. "I understand, Evie, I won't sternness. You will also completely sever all contact with Leo." I commanded, securing the perimeter around my nephew. "You will not call him, you will not send him birthday cards. You are a toxic vulnerability. And you are permanently firewalled from his life." "Okay," she whispered, utterly broken. I hung up the phone, I leaned back in my ergonomic executive chair. I looked at the 6 monitors glowing with the secure, encrypted data of my $8.5 million empire. The entire network was clean. Valerie was neutralized, financially crippled by her own greed, and currently navigating a brutal, public divorce. Marcus was gone, fleeing the blast radius of his wife's felony. Beatrice was isolated, paralyzed by the threat of total legal annihilation. The system was finally, perfectly secure. It is a strange, quiet feeling when you realize that you have mathematically optimized your own family out of your life. Society tells us that family is an unbreakable bond. Society tells us that blood is thicker than water. Society tells us that we must forgive, we must accommodate, and we must endlessly tolerate the toxic, destructive behavior of the people who happen to share our genetic code. Society is wrong. Blood is not a security clearance. Sharing a last name does not grant you unauthorized administrative access to my life, my peace, or my wealth. When a biological relative attempts to execute a hostile takeover of your assets, they are no longer a relative. They are a malicious actor, and you treat them exactly how you treat any other malicious actor. You isolate, you secure, and you destroy. A year has passed since that birthday party. The $8.5 million estate has grown by 11% under the rigorous, mathematical management of the irrevocable blind trust. The commercial properties are thriving, the liquid assets are secured in diversified, high-yield offshore accounts that Julian Vance personally monitors. I still live in my minimalist, high-tech penthouse in the sky. I still work 80-hour weeks as a senior cybersecurity architect, hunting down international financial hackers and building digital fortresses that no one can breach. I have not spoken to Valerie, Marcus, or Beatrice in exactly 365 days. My phone does not ring with their manufactured crises. My inbox is not cluttered with their manipulative requests for money. The silence in my life is profound, absolute, and exquisitely peaceful. But there is one exception. Every Sunday afternoon, at exactly 2:00 p.m., my phone rings. "Incoming call, Leo." I answer it immediately. "Hello, buddy." "Hi, Auntie Evie." Leo's voice comes through the speaker, bright, energetic, and completely free of the suffocating anxiety that used to define him. He lives with Marcus now, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment. It is a massive downgrade from the 5-bedroom mansion, but Leo doesn't care about square footage. He cares about the fact that the screaming matches have stopped. He cares about the fact that he no longer has to carry the crushing weight of adult secrets. We talk about his school projects. We talk about the massive, complex Lego architectures he is currently building. He has a brilliant, structural mind. He understands how things connect. He understands how things hold together. I never mention the $250,000 educational trust waiting for him in the secure servers. I never mention the fact that his college is entirely paid for, or that he will have the ultimate financial freedom to build whatever life he chooses when he turns 18. He doesn't need to know the math yet, he just needs to know that his foundation is secure. He told me the truth, and I made absolutely certain that his truth was rewarded with unbreakable, institutional power. That is how you build a legacy, but the architecture of a silent empire is never truly finished. 3 months ago, the global financial institution where I work experienced a massive, highly sophisticated distributed denial of service DDoS attack, masked as a diversion for a deeper, surgical ransomware insertion. It was a multi-tiered assault orchestrated by an elite international syndicate. They were attempting to bypass our primary firewall, breach the core ledger, and freeze $6 billion in institutional liquidity. The attack hit our servers at exactly 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. My encrypted emergency phone woke me up. I did not panic. I logged into my terminal in the penthouse. For the next 36 hours, I sat in the cold blue light of my monitors and fought a silent, invisible war. I tracked their routing paths. I anticipated their lateral movements within our subnet. I deployed aggressive countermeasures, systematically locking them out of the primary nodes, funneling their malicious packets into dead-end digital traps, and mathematically dismantling their code until their entire assault collapsed into useless, fragmented data. We lost exactly $0. The $6 billion remained perfectly secure. When it was over, my CEO called me personally. He was exhausted, terrified, and profoundly grateful. He offered me a massive promotion and a high seven-figure retention bonus. Evelyn, he had said over the encrypted line, his voice echoing with relief. How did you stay so calm? The entire board was convinced we were going to lose the primary ledger. Most people would have folded under that kind of catastrophic, psychological pressure. I didn't tell him the truth. I simply accepted the promotion. But the truth is, fighting a syndicate of faceless, international cybercriminals for $6 billion is incredibly easy, compared to sitting at your own birthday party while your sister tries to steal your inheritance. Hackers are predictable. They follow the rigid laws of code. They operate on cold logic and mathematical probabilities. They do not look you in the eye, smile warmly, and offer you a piece of lemon cake while holding a forged power of attorney document behind their back. Hackers do not use your love, your grief, or your familial loyalty as a weapon against you. When you learn to defend an $8 million estate from the people who share your DNA, defending $6 billion from strangers is just routine maintenance. Valerie never understood this. She fundamentally misunderstood the nature of strength. She believed that strength was loud. She believed it was visible. She thought strength meant driving a leased Range Rover, wearing a $3,000 designer dress, and hosting catered dinners for people who didn't actually care if she lived or died. She thought that if you projected the illusion of power loudly enough on social media, the universe would simply hand you the reality of it. She thought I was weak because I was quiet, because I lived in a minimalist penthouse instead of a sprawling mansion. Because I worked 80-hour weeks in the shadows of the financial sector instead of plastering my face across luxury event magazines. She equated my silence with vulnerability. She equated my grief with incompetence. It is the most fatal, devastating mistake a predator can make. Never mistake a woman's silence for surrender. Sometimes, silence is just the terrifying, undetectable sound a brilliant architect makes while she builds the digital fortress that will permanently lock you out of her empire. I want to pause the narrative here, because I know there are people listening to this right now who are experiencing the exact same suffocating reality. There are people listening who have a Valerie in their family. A toxic sister, an entitled brother, a manipulative aunt. Someone who views your success as their personal ATM. Someone who uses the word family not as a bond of love, but as a crowbar to pry open your boundaries and access your assets. Maybe they are pressuring you to co-sign a loan they will never repay. Maybe they are quietly siphoning money from a joint account you set up to help an elderly parent. Maybe they are actively spreading vicious, defamatory lies about your mental competence at church or at family gatherings to isolate you from your support system. They do this because they rely on your politeness. They rely on the fact that you are too nice to demand a forensic audit. They rely on the fact that you will swallow the insult, smile through the resentment, and choose the illusion of family peace over the brutal reality of the math. I am telling you right now, stop choosing the illusion. If you suspect they are stealing, do not confront them in a screaming, emotional rage. Do not cry, do not beg them to respect you. Emotion is a vulnerability they will exploit. Emotion gives them leverage. Instead, become an architect. Gather the data, pull the bank statements, highlight the unauthorized transactions, trace the IP addresses, secure your digital perimeter, change your passwords to complex multi-factor cryptographic keys. Hire a ruthless attorney who understands that familial theft is not a misunderstanding. It is a felony. Build your fortress. Let them think you are completely oblivious. Let them keep smiling. Let them keep baking their cakes, and then, when you have absolute, undeniable, mathematical proof of their betrayal, you drop the guillotine, you freeze the accounts, you transfer the assets into an impenetrable trust. You hand them the forensic file and you walk away. You do not owe your empire to someone who views you as a target. You owe your empire to yourself and to the people who tell you the truth, even when their voice is shaking. 6 months after the catastrophic audit in my penthouse, Valerie tried one final, desperate maneuver. She didn't call, she didn't email, she knew those vectors were permanently blocked. Instead, she showed up at the massive steel and glass lobby of my corporate headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was returning from a high-level security briefing with the Department of Defense. I walked through the revolving doors, flanked by 2 armed corporate security guards. Valerie was standing by the reception desk. She looked entirely diminished. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a cheap off-the-rack suit. Her hair was pulled back haphazardly. The arrogance had been completely stripped from her face, leaving only the hollow, desperate exhaustion of a woman who had spent 6 months being crushed by the weight of her own debt. She saw me and practically ran across the marble lobby. "Evelyn, Evie, please," she cried, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. Several executives turned to look. My security detail immediately stepped forward to intercept her. But I raised a single hand. They stopped, allowing her to approach within 5 feet. "Evie, I am begging you," Valerie sobbed, completely abandoning any pretense of dignity in the middle of a corporate lobby. "I lost the business, Marcus left me. I am living in a studio apartment in Queens. I can't pay my legal bills. The divorce is bankrupting me. Please, you have $8 million. Just give me 50,000. Just a loan. I will sign whatever you want. I will do whatever you want, please, Evie. I am your sister." I stopped walking. I looked at her. I didn't see my sister. I saw a neutralized threat. I saw the woman who tried to manipulate a grieving daughter. I saw the woman who terrified a 7-year-old boy into keeping a felony a secret. I saw the woman who tried to forge a document that would have erased my entire life. "I am not a bank, Valerie," I said. My voice was perfectly modulated. It did not carry an ounce of pity, nor did it carry an ounce of anger. It was the sound of absolute, unbreakable code. "Please," she wailed, tears streaming down her face, trying to grab my arm. I took one precise step back, ensuring she could not make physical contact. $50,000 is not a loan, Valerie. It is a subsidy for your incompetence. I stated clearly, ensuring the security guards and the passing executives heard every single word. You stole $418,000 from this family. You attempted to forge a durable power of attorney to seize the rest of the estate. You are currently avoiding a federal wire fraud indictment solely because I chose mercy over prosecution. Valerie froze. The public humiliation of having her crimes laid out in the middle of a corporate lobby hit her like a physical blow. "I have mathematically removed you from my network," I continued. "The trust is blind, the accounts are locked. You do not exist in my financial architecture, and you no longer exist in my life. Do not ever approach me again. If you step foot in this lobby a second time, my security team will have you arrested for criminal trespass. And Julian Vance will submit the forensic file to the FBI before you reach the precinct." I did not wait for her response. I turned and walked toward the secure biometric elevators. The security guards immediately flanked Valerie, politely but firmly escorting the weeping, broken woman out of the revolving doors and onto the cold pavement of the city. I rode the elevator up to the 75th floor. I swiped my encrypted keycard. I walked into the server room, The air conditioning was humming perfectly. The servers were blinking in synchronized, secure harmony the firewall was holding. The empire was safe. I am Evelyn Cross. I am a senior cybersecurity architect. I build fortresses, and I absolutely never let the wrong people inside. 6 months after Valerie was escorted out of my corporate lobby, she made one final catastrophic miscalculation. Desperate, drowning in debt, and facing the absolute reality of a poverty she had spent her entire adult life running away from, Valerie attempted to sue the irrevocable blind trust. She managed to find a low-tier ambulance-chasing attorney who worked on contingency. They filed a civil suit in the New York State Supreme Court, claiming that I had used undue influence over our parents to secure the role of sole trustee, and that the creation of the blind trust was an illegal maneuver designed to financially starve my own sister. It was a pathetic, legally illiterate Hail Mary. Julian Vance called me when the filing crossed his desk. I could hear him smiling through the phone. "Evelyn," Julian said, his voice practically purring with predatory delight. "Your sister has decided to walk into a federal courthouse and formally accuse us of financial malfeasance under oath. Did she mention the $418,000 she already embezzled?" I asked, looking out over the Manhattan skyline from my penthouse office. "Curiously, that detail was omitted from her affidavit," Julian replied. "I have already scheduled the preliminary hearing for next Tuesday. I will not require your presence. I am going to handle this personally. I didn't attend the hearing. I had a massive security overhaul to run for a client in Zurich." But Julian sent me a highly detailed, highly clinical summary of exactly what transpired. Valerie showed up to the courthouse wearing one of her last remaining designer suits, attempting to project the image of a wronged wealthy heiress. Her discount attorney stood before the judge and launched into a long emotional monologue about familial fairness and the tragic manipulation of an elderly couple's estate. The judge, a no-nonsense veteran of the commercial division, listened for exactly 3 minutes before turning to Julian Vance. Julian did not give an emotional speech. He did not talk about fairness. He simply approached the bench and handed the judge the thick, color-coded forensic file we had compiled on the day of the audit. "Your Honor," Julian stated, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom, "the plaintiff is not a wronged beneficiary. The plaintiff is a documented embezzler who systematically siphoned $418,650 from the estate's operational liquidity over a period of 34 months. Furthermore, the plaintiff attempted to execute a forged durable power of attorney to seize the remaining $8.5 million. The evidence is comprehensively detailed in the file before you, including IP traces, dummy LLC registrations, and the forged document itself." The judge opened the file, he read the summary, he flipped to the IP logs, he looked at the forged power of attorney. The temperature in the courtroom plummeted. The judge looked up from the forensic file and locked eyes with Valerie's attorney. "Counselor," the judge said, his voice carrying the terrifying weight of a pending federal indictment, "were you aware of this evidence before you filed this civil action?" Valerie's attorney turned completely white. He had no idea Valerie had lied to him, omitting the crucial detail that her sister possessed irrefutable digital proof of a massive felony. "No, Your Honor." The attorney stammered, physically stepping away from Valerie at the plaintiff's table. "Case dismissed with prejudice," the judge slammed his gavel down. He then pointed a finger directly at Valerie. "Ms. Cross, you are extraordinarily fortunate that the defendant has chosen not to submit this file to the federal prosecutor's office. If you ever waste the time of this court again with a fraudulent civil action, I will personally initiate a perjury investigation against you." "Get out of my courtroom." Valerie was forced to pay Julian Vance's exorbitant legal fees for the hearing. It completely wiped out the last remaining dollars in her depleted savings account. I met Julian for lunch the following week at a high-end, extremely exclusive private club in Midtown. We sat at a quiet corner table. Julian ordered a $300 bottle of Cabernet. "The architecture of the law is fascinating, isn't it, Evelyn?" Julian mused, swirling the dark red wine in his glass. "It operates exactly like a computer system, It does not care about your tears. It does not care about your emotional monologues. It only cares about your inputs. Your sister inputted a lie, we inputted a verified dataset. The system executed the only logical outcome. She relied on the emotional vulnerability of a courtroom. I said, cutting into my steak. She thought a judge would look at a crying sister and override the math. A fatal error, Julian agreed. Judges in the commercial division do not deal in emotion. They deal in ledgers, and your ledgers were flawless. I took a sip of my wine. It was rich, complex, and utterly perfect. She is completely bankrupt now, Julian noted casually, as if observing the weather. The legal fees broke her. I received notification yesterday that her studio apartment in Queens is facing eviction proceedings. I felt absolutely nothing, no guilt, no triumph, no residual familial pity. When you build a firewall, you do not feel sorry for the virus that smashes itself to pieces against the code. The virus made a choice to attack. The firewall simply did its job. I have spent my entire life being the silent one. The one who watched from the background while my sister consumed the oxygen in every room. I was the one who solved the complex math equations while she organized the parties. I was the one who built the infrastructure while she claimed the credit. But infrastructure always outlasts the illusion. A party ends, the champagne goes flat. The designer clothes go out of style, the Instagram likes fade into the digital abyss. But an $8.5 million trust, secured by a team of apex corporate lawyers and a senior cybersecurity architect. Compound interest, it grows, it hardens, it becomes a generational fortress. I look at the legacy my parents built, and I know they would be proud. They didn't leave the empire to the loudest person in the room. They left it to the person who knew exactly how to lock the doors. What would you have done? If your own flesh and blood attempted to forge a document to steal an $8 million estate, would you have forgiven them? Would you have bought their pathetic excuses about business bridge loans and family emergencies? Would you have tried to save the relationship at the cost of your own security? Or would you do exactly what I did? Lock the digital doors, deploy the forensic audit, and let the math execute the guilty? Drop your brutally honest answer in the comments below. Let me know if you would have handed the forensic file to the FBI, or if the financial destruction was punishment enough. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the perfect time to hit that button and turn on notifications. Because silent women are building empires every single day, and their stories are the ones that actually hold the structural weight of the truth. I will see you in the next one.